Tonight, the firestorm of controversy continues in Grand Bahama after local companies are placed under the gun for taking measures they thought would lower electricity costs. Since then, both the regulator and power company have stepped into the picture, creating even more lines of questioning tonight. Meantime, residents on the island are adamant they will do what it takes to lower their bills in an already tight economy. We continue tonight to take a closer look at the players and the possible outcomes. Beyond the Headlines starts now. Grand Bahama Power Company this week on the defense that electricity was being stolen, but their statement leaves more questions than answers. Good evening, everyone. I'm Clint Watson, and welcome to the show. As if arrests weren't enough in a bill of rage, the Grand Bahama Power Company released an extensive statement, on one hand clearing the Coopers from involvement in fraud, but on the other hand criticizing the use of so-called energy devices, which they claim were all fake. Here's a recap of what their statement had to say. According to the Grand Bahama Power Company, after investigating their customers, they have determined that these businesses are victims of fraud. The company says they have also confirmed that these businesses were either connected directly to the Grand Bahama Power Company's power system via meter bypass, or the meters were tampered with to underread actual usage. The power company claims that while these companies were under the impression that they were using an energy-saving device, their investigations have proven that these devices are not energy-saving devices. In a statement from the power company, they said to date, at every location inspected by the Grand Bahama Power Company and the Royal Bahamas Police Force, in the presence of the owners, it has been shown that all devices are simply boxes consisting of bogus wiring with red or green lights, some with small unconnected LCD screens, and sand-filled canisters pretending to be capacitors in some instances. The power company claims that these fake boxes do nothing but act as a smokescreen for the dangerous diversion of Grand Bahama Power Company's electricity supply and bypass of their meter infrastructure. The power company tonight is saying that all customers with these fake boxes installed throughout the island have been extracting Grand Bahama Power Company electricity supply without paying for the electricity consumed. The power company says none of the devices installed in businesses or homes in Grand Bahama were similar to the ones used to give examples in news reports of energy-saving devices. Grand Bahama Power Company says installations to divert electricity supply and bypass metering infrastructure are extremely dangerous to business owners, homeowners, occupiers, their workers, and the public at large. The company says they do not know how many fake devices and non-compliant installations exist. The statement ends by the power company declaring that they will continue to be the leading proponent for the adoption of energy savings and renewable energy on the island and will provide support to customers to legitimately reduce their energy costs. Now, we can also tell you that the press release also came this week from the Grand Bahama Port Authority, the licensee, and of course the regulator. And they said in a statement they wish to advise the public that as regulators, they were notified of what was happening and what was transpiring. What we found interesting was what they said. They said, as a result, we immediately began our own independent investigation into this matter, which is currently ongoing. Thus far, we can confirm that all of the work performed by the licensee was unpermitted and was executed outside the scope of the license. As this matter is currently the Royal Bahamas Police Force and investigations are still ongoing, we don't wish to comment any further on the interference with the investigations. We do believe that due process will be carried out. We're hoping to have this matter amicably resolved as soon as possible for the benefit of the entire Grand Bahama community. We will continue to dialogue with the Grand Bahama Power Company as well as a scheduled meeting with the Cooper family and the Coalition of Concerned Citizens. Speaking of the Coalition of Concerned Citizens, joining me live now on the line is the head of the coalition, Pastor Eddie Victor. Sir, thank you for joining us on the show and welcome.
Well, good evening, Clint, and good evening, Bahamas.
My first question, obviously, is the regulator, the Port Authority, is now saying they will be in a scheduled meeting with you. And of course, they're saying at the end of the day, the person they licensed to carry out this work He did not do what he was supposed to have been doing. The Grand Bahama Power Company says none of these devices were actually devices that could lower power company. Are you a bit concerned that there seems to be a contradiction between these two agencies? The regulator who would have given the license to this person to sell a product that you would think they believe is to reduce power, and then the Grand Bahama Power Company now saying none of these devices actually could do what it says they were about to do. Do you see a gray area here?
I think based on the press statements that have gone out so far, what hasn't happened is there hasn't been an independent assessment
Correct.
and investigation of these devices and how they were installed. And so I know that the families involved have been advised to have their own independent investigation done by a certified electrical engineer just to ascertain one, was it a true device, power saving device? Because there are legal power saving devices out there. And two, whether there was tampering with the meter or a bypass of the meter, which means that they would have been connected to the grid and not connected to the grid legally.
Let me ask you another question, because I think it's a very important issue to bring up here, and that is, according to the Grand Bahama Power Company, they obviously in their statement would have felt that the Hoopers and their businesses were victims of fraud and not the perpetrators of fraud. Having said that, is there a concern on Grand Bahama that this Grand Bahama Power Company went about this the wrong way, and now you treated victims by having them arrested and questioned rather than having a conversation with them? Is there a concern in the community tonight as to how these Bahamian businesses were dealt with by this company?
Well, throughout Grand Bahama, both with businesses and with residents on this island, there is that understanding that the way that the Grand Bahama Power Company went about this was completely wrong. You see, if you have discovered that there is some anomaly with power service to a customer, then what you do is you contact the customer and you arrange a meeting, and you then would come together, explain what the problem is, and then you come to some agreement on how to move forward. None of this was done. As a matter of fact, you need to be concerned about exactly what happened. What happened is that the power company went and filed a criminal complaint about its customers, and in this case, long-standing customers. In the case of one of the restaurants, the restaurant has been a customer for 50 years.
Wow.
And you file a criminal complaint without contacting them, without telling them there's a problem. You file this complaint with the police, and somebody leaked the information out into social media. I believe all of this was strategically done. And then the next day, you're on the premises of the Coopers, the Simonettes, the Burrows, and you're disconnecting their power. And when the owners realized what was going on, the owners actually spoke to the power company officials who came to their premises, and they were telling them that they will cut them off because they suspect that there is power theft. And the owners said to them, listen, don't cut off the power. Let the power stay on, and we will come in the morning. We're not going anywhere. We live right here. We're not going anywhere. But despite that, during a busy time, while they're doing business, they cut off the power.
Yeah, that's why I have the serious issue is how the whole manner in which this was dealt with, and people have been saying, oh, you treat all customers the same way, not because the business people are prominent, you get special treatment, but it's not special treatment. It's how we would treat any and everybody. Would you want that to happen to a private citizen in their home? No, and I think the mere fact that they didn't treat everybody equally because we've discovered that there were other companies who were being suspected as well. Other companies, persons who own these companies, I'm going to say it, white people, and nothing happened to them. They weren't cut off or they weren't arrested. So why was this family arrested and others won't? I have a problem with that.
Yeah, well, yeah, and you should, because because of firstly, the greater problem in Grand Bahama is the high cost of electricity.
Yeah.
And what this has done, and I think you've accurately reported it, that people began to take measures on how can we reduce the cost of energy. So families like the Coopers, what they did is they began to change the fixtures in their businesses, putting LED light bulbs. Then they began to get more energy efficient equipment.
So they were taking measures all along to try and reduce the high cost of the bill.
To reduce the cost of energy.
I'm going to ask you, Pastor Victor, to stand by. We're just going to take a quick break. We're going to ask you to stand by, and we'll pick up this conversation. And I'll bring my guest in, who's in studio with me. Former BEC Chairman Leslie Miller is here. We want to bring him in on the conversation. We're back after this.
Awesome.
Stay close.
Okay.
Man, I observe, look, but don't touch. Tickets are going fast. Stop into any cash and show location. Grab at the mall at Marathon and any live store except Harbor Bay. And get ready to see your boy. Don't wanna miss it.
Welcome back to the show. We're talking about the Grand Bahama Power Company situation in Grand Bahama. They released a statement this week and talking about really the ethics of this. So the power company went on record saying they were able to confirm with their electrician that none of these devices were actually used or were being affected. They were filled with sand. But what instead happened was there was cutting into the meter to slow down and not record the amount of power they were using, meter tampering in other words. And they did say, well, based on their investigation, the Coopers were victims of this. So they probably found enough evidence to believe they probably weren't aware of it. But the person who was licensed to sell this product was the one deceitful, the one who was in custody, obviously, bypassing and going beyond this. But we were talking to the coalition for concerned citizens, Eddie Victor, before the break. And I want to bring into the conversation Leslie Miller, former chairman of BEC as well, because obviously we're going to talk about the bigger picture, which is power supply and the high cost of energy, electricity in Grand Bahama, which has been an ongoing issue. But I think even before we go to that bigger question, obviously we're still focusing on the fact that how this was dealt with. How this was done to a prominent Bahamian family, servicing, operating business. We've heard Pastor Victor say, 50 years. It could have been done differently. Yeah. Your take on this, Mr. Miller?
You know, I read the story and saw in the newspapers, heard on the radio and your television show. I think the whole scenario was despicable because you have customers like the Coopers who are well known in Grand Bahama. They are really the mainstay of Grand Bahama with all the respective businesses.
Right.
Having employed in excess of 500 Bahamians over the last 50 years. You only had to make a telephone call. Because obviously, as you write your bills up on a monthly basis, you would see that there's a dramatic decrease in that those customers that you have online, companies belong to the Coopers. So you call and say, listen, there's a problem here. what we're going to do is check. We don't understand how you could have cut your bill in half.
Exactly.
If that is the case.
Because you would be able to see every month the drastic changes.
Therefore, let us go and examine and ascertain what has happened here.
Exactly.
You then send your top brass there, the engineers, to take a look if they found that, in fact, what they say is the case that was found. But I think with regard to the Grand Bahama Port Authority, I don't know if you can blame them for the gentleman who sold those devices, because when you get a license in Freeport, they can't really, you're not going to tell them what you're selling.
Right.
The guy just got a license as an engineer selling products, so they would not have known.
So they just licensed them for the service itself.
Exactly. They would not have known that this guy was selling these fraudulent products. Mind you, I can't blame the Grand Bahama electricity company for...
Power company.
The power company for getting hold of the matter, because even though the cost is so ridiculously expensive in Grand Bahama, that's why people are resorting to any means possible to enable me to live comfortably by having electricity. Because the basic needs of life is what? Water and light. You know, and because of the drastic cost, and that's because they have a monopoly, and whatever price they charge, you got to pay, or you're off.
And that's just the way it is.
You have no choice.
And I think this brings in the next question, why there is this concern for regulation, for IRCA to be able to regulate. Because right now, they're not regulated by IRCA. Well, you know, they're regulated by the Port Authority.
Listen, well, again, you have a government within a government, eh?
Right, right.
You have a government within the government. You have the Grand Bahama Port Authority that's in the government within the government of the Bahamas. Now you got IRCA, really, that IRCA leave a lot to be desired.
I agree.
A lot to be desired in all phases. I hear them now talking, but they want to go now to panels and get the banks to try to facilitate Bahamians in getting involved. That's not going to happen. The banks aren't going to give you the money. They're not going to take the risk associated with it. When we were at BEC, we had tried to work out a plan with the Chinese government to enable us to get all the panels on credit through BEC, and then farm them out to our major customers and just tack on the amount that we would pay the Chinese government every month for the cost of the apparatus and tack it onto your bill. Your bill may go up maybe 15%, but you know you're having a device that within the next year or so, your bill will be decreased by about 50, at least 50%. That's how you do it.
So there are devices there that can bring the cost of electricity down.
Well, listen, obviously the device that this guy was using was a fraud, eh? And I think he should be dealt with.
Right.
Because he caused problems on both sides.
On both sides.
There was an expectation with the residents of Freeport that there was some miracle device that this guy had that he was selling them, and it turned out to be fraudulent. So their expectation was dash. At the same time, the Grand Bahama electricity company came down hard on them because they want their money. And whatever cost I push on to you, you will pay it or you'll be disconnected. They shamed the Cooper family, which I thought was disgraceful, just because they could. But as you said, which is more damning, in a country like the Bahamas, where the 92% of the population is of color, and you don't do it to your customers that are white, it shows the prejudice and the racism inherent in the mindset of these people who controls that company.
Very true.
And it's a Canadian company, by the way, and they were about to buy BEC before we took over in 2012.
Wow.
They were on the verge of buying BEC.
Eddie Victor, can you confirm whether or not the Port Authority does have interest in the Grand Bahama electric company? They had
50% interest.
They had 50%.
Yeah, they had 50%. I believe they sold it though, eh?
Yes, that's correct.
The
Grand Bahama Port Authority has no interest in the Grand Bahama Power Company.
They sold out just before the death of the late Sir Edwardson George.
Correct.
Yeah.
You got it.
Yeah.
You got it.
I remember.
How desperate has it become on the island for people to survive and lower the cost? Some people say that their electricity bills is their second largest bill next to their mortgage.
No doubt about that.
Yeah.
That
is correct. On the island, what you have is the fact that the high cost of electricity has had tremendous economic fallout. Let's just talk about residential consumers. There are people who are actually living without power for years because they had to make a decision. I'm going to either pay rent or pay power. Wow. I got to try to stay in my house, pay my mortgage, or pay power. That's real. Another thing which if you pay close enough attention to, all of the major food stores has a section that is quite prominent where they're selling propane canisters. And some stores, you would see that they would stack these propane canisters at the corner of the shelf or at the end of the shelves because they want that product to be prominent.
Yeah. Wow.
That is one of the top sellers in the food stores, these propane canisters, because a lot of people are cooking on propane burners. And because of financial conditions, buying these small canisters for them with the amount of income that they have coming in becomes more feasible for them to buy constantly so they can be able to cook. Let's talk about businesses. Multiple businesses have closed in Grand Bahama because of the high cost of electricity. Fenestration Glass Company employed over 80 Bahamians. And because of the high cost of electricity, 80 Bahamians. And because of the high cost of electricity and the power company taking them to court because they began to run their own generators and found out that the cost of electricity was more economical. And also that less of their equipment was being damaged because of the unstableness of the current that was going into their business. And so after that court case with the power company, the Fenestration Glass Company closed its doors and packed up and went to another country.
Wow.
And that's just one example of so many I could give.
Pastor Victor, let's pause again, take a break, and we'll come right back and continue. You're watching Beyond the Headlines. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we continue with this. As you're hearing these serious, drastic stories of how people have had to resort to businesses closing, other people have to put generators in place because it's cheaper to run a generator. We'll talk about this more when we come back after the break.
Stop! We waiting on, boy?
Oh, I waiting on Miami to draw.
Why you waiting on that, boy? Listen, you go play quick draw from 8 a.m. and they have 32 draws a day, Papa. What you playing anyway?
Come on, you being serious? And I waiting on 320 to draw.
320?
Yeah.
But that been dropping quick draw long time. You was be slugging. Man, you could have then win, and you receiving the same payouts anyway.
Hold on. Bust up. Okay, be smacked.
Quick Draw. 32 draws a day. Why wait? Speed up your winnings today.
Surrounding the most prestigious communities of Western New Providence, you will discover corporate luxury. Welcome to Viridian, the most exclusive commercial development in the Bahamas. Enjoy deluxe, contemporary, and open-concept office suites with world-class amenities placed in close proximity to high-net-worth clients. This is where corporate meets luxury. To visit our sales gallery, contact 457-0508 or 438-6800. Viridian, where corporate meets luxury.
Welcome back. We're preparing to wrap up our discussion. I'm just flabbergasted after hearing Pastor Victor talk about the desperate measures people in Grand Bahama are going to just to be able to survive. I mean, buying, the canisters, companies closing down, companies running generators because it's cheaper to operate. And who do you go to for recourse? Who do people in Grand Bahama turn to say, somebody help us? This power company, their rates are ridiculous. It's hard to operate. Who do you go to? The government ain't responding.
The primary responsibility for the government is its people, eh?
Right.
But, the government has allowed the Grand Bahama Port Authority to regroup and have their power back.
Yeah.
And no one can really talk to them anymore. And the power company in Freeport is a goddamn to themselves. So they do whatever they want to do when they want to do it. If you don't like it, we cut you off.
But have you ever heard such desperate measures that people are doing just to operate?
Well, what I find incredible is the fact that you could produce with generators cheaper than you can buy from a company that has, thousands of customers on their system. I find that incredible. I mean, it's enormously expensive.
In fact,
enormously.
And I want to present this to you, Mr. Miller, and to you, Pastor Victor. We've been doing some research ourselves, and we understand that there are some major companies who are on the grid. Obviously, we know the companies like the Container Port and the blasting, the rock blasting company.
Bahama Rock.
Bahama Rock.
Yeah.
They are major companies on the grid. I understand that their bills can be almost as high as $1 million a month in electricity. And what I heard the proposition has been made was to give them their own generator, their own small plant, so that they can take them off of the grid. Because what's been happening, and people have proven this to us in Grand Bahama, that because they're on the grid, when their machinery is turned up and turned on, that power is affecting everybody in the area. So what's been happening is, and people have tested it, if you have clocks, digital clocks on the wall or any other clocks, you find that after a while, you're having to constantly reset the clock because it's moving faster.
It malfunctions.
And so what they've been saying by their researchers been happening is, when it moves faster, it's because your meter is turning faster, causing your time to advance because the power is being turned up from these other companies. Which means that residences in Grand Bahama are paying for what they haven't used. Mr. Victor, have you heard about this?
That's correct. That is absolutely correct. I can give you a personal example. We have a clock on we have a gas stove, but we have an electronic clock that's on the gas stove. I set it a couple months ago. I set it to the right time, and I haven't changed it since because I want to see how far this thing would go forward. That clock has gone forward 18 hours.
Wow.
Did you hear what I'm saying? 18 hours.
That's
ahead.
Electricity you're paying for that you didn't use.
Come on now. I'm just telling you. So that is correct. The current, the frequency that's being delivered to the customers and businesses is very unstable. And so as a result, many businesses have had problems with their equipment. And when they would go and try to file claims, the power company is just taking them around the ropes. Many of them do not get no resolution from the power company in way of compensation.
No, because they're not interested. They don't care about that. They're not interested in trying to settle your concern. They're in there to make money, and they've been making millions every year, even in a difficult time. And it goes to prove that if your explanation of the clock it verifies what other people have been telling us with experiments, that means Grand Bahamians are paying for power they're not using. They're paying more. That's wrong. So and that's why people cannot afford their power bills, because they're paying for power they're not even using. And who gives recourse to that? Who is addressing that? There are 5 MPs in Grand Bahama. And what are they doing?
What they've been doing.
What is that?
Nothing.
Something's wrong with that. Something is absolutely wrong with that. And so I think this case raises an even bigger case, that somebody has to be able to step in and be able to mediate and say there has to be some changes that comes for the people of Grand Bahama.
Well, can't UICA intervene? I mean, what's the purpose of
UICA is in court now trying to get the jurisdiction to intervene. In court. We spoke to them. They said they in court.
Court for what?
Trying to get with the Grand Bahama Port Authority, trying to get rights to regulate.
Yes, to regulate Grand
that's right.
But how can that be?
They are in court.
Listen, the government is an independent government in this country. The government cannot get the Grand Bahama Power Company to work with UICA.
Thank you.
The government can't do that.
That should tell you.
The government can't do that.
That should raise alarm to every Bahamian in this country as to whether this country is really run and operated by the government of the Bahamas.
Exactly.
That's our concern
Very
today.
dangerous.
Because when you see foreign entities can arrest you and arrest prominent Bahamians who are hiring you and then ask questions later and leave other foreigners who have companies who are violating on and then charge you, the Bahamian consumer in Grand Bahama, excess for your bills while big machineries are being operated by foreign companies and you're paying the bill because they're on the same grid and nobody's doing anything about it, something is wrong. When you have 5 MPs and the majority of them remain quiet because Frederick McAlpine has been speaking out. But the majority of them are quiet. Something is wrong in this country and Grand Bahama needs to have the attention right away. We out of time. We got to continue this. Eddie Victor, thank you so much for joining me on the line, and we wait to hear the outcome of your continuous meetings as you go forward for the people of Grand Bahama. Thank you, sir. And of course, Mr. Miller, we say thank you to you for being here and shedding some light onto us. We are watching this situation in Grand Bahama. The Bahamian people are demanding for action in Grand Bahama. It is unfair what is happening with electricity bills. People are resorting to all of these devices and are resorting to all measures, including not having electricity because they're trying to survive. And government is quiet. You've heard what's been happening. You've heard people are being billed for power they're not using. It's time now for somebody to make this power company accountable and cause there to be change. That's our show. I'm Clint Watson. Thanks for joining us. Good night.